Thank you very much for the nice welcome. And thank you for the Bundesrepublik Deutschland für die nette Einladung. And also all the preparation organization, which is exactly seamless. Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a privilege to be here with the distinguished speakers, guests, and colleagues from the world, throughout the world. So a little bit about the FDA. Well, our mission is basically the next slide, I do pass them, is that it? Next, yes, sorry about that. Our mission is very clear. It's health and human safety. There's no economic edge we want to gain. We don't open markets, and that puts us in a very easy position, actually, because when we have to make decisions, the bottom line is what is the outcome for health and human safety in the United States. So basically, what we regulate is easier to explain what we do not regulate. We do not regulate meat, poultry, and processed eggs. Everything else related to food, FDA does regulate. So that's an easier way to remember it. So with that said, we go down the path of, we pride ourselves on the great technical experts we have. We are top-heavy in science, data, and when we have discussions, we always ask, show me the data. And that's the analysis that we like to do when we make our decisions. Past that. Okay. So basically, what we're going to be discussing today is how we see this e-commerce changing the way we have to look at food safety. We see that as one of our priorities. It's something that we have been dealing with. So we are going to talk about how we keep the focus on food safety, and also the opportunities and challenges we have ahead. And then we're going to finish up with some thoughts and where we could go from here. Well, basically, we have seen this before, these numbers and from others. But basically, if you look at it, 3 billion people have access to the internet. So that's almost, we're getting close to half of the world population. And then we have 1 billion approximately digital buyers. And we also see that each economy has different trends, different needs, and that is just part of democracy. So we have different choices, and they should have it. So let me just see, this is different from what I have. Okay, so what is the road ahead? What are we looking at? So we see the change happening. We see that people are using more e-based, electronic-based devices to purchase their things. We see that transportation modes are changing. And that is where food science is nothing new. But basically, we have to rethink how we apply the strategies we already have in place. So we have taken a step back. Instead of saying, OK, let's regulate, we said, let's educate first. We may have all the structure, the regulatory tools already. Why create new ones? We don't even understand it right now from FDA's perspective, the complexities of what is happening. So we're really taking our time and studying. Because as competent authorities, if you come out with a wrong recommendation, you lose trust. If you lose public trust, that's the most difficult thing to gain again. So when you come to the table, people have to trust you. Otherwise, you're going to have a harder time to implement your strategies. It's as simple as that. So we look at all these factors and say, hey, how's the temperature control? What are people doing? Where are potentials for cross-contamination, and et cetera? So food packaging is the next thing. So how are these goods being delivered? We see a difference in there. So again, going back to the potentials of harm being done to human health. Are these packages leaching into the food? Are you having things going into the food that you haven't predicted before, right? How long is the transportation? Do we have to take a better look at the cold chain, at how everything is being done? So we are looking at these factors. Also, there are no borders anymore. People say, oh yeah, what happens here in a matter of hours, it's not days anymore, could be in the United States. So yeah, so we cannot say, oh, this is happening there. It will happen in your country. I see that because I was working on a project. We were looking at cyclospora in 1999. That was one of the products that was coming into our country and was contaminated. We went to that country and did work. Today we have it in the US. We thought we would not have it, and we had mechanisms in place. No, your borders don't exist anymore. So it's just a matter of, the question is when, not if anymore. So all these controls, they are relevant. So we look at time, we look at temperature, cross-contamination, tamper-resistant, and one another T I would like to add to this. So it's time, temperature, tamper-resistant, and traceability. The 4 T's are key. Yeah? So what is next? We're bombarded with new ways of purchasing products here. Mail orders, online grocery markets, as we have heard, home delivery, and these home meal preparation kits. You get a recipe, everything comes to your home, you prepare your own food, but it's all separate ingredients. So now the dynamic has changed. And we have to understand is how the consumer is using it. Most of the people selling, well, the manufacturers, they have good intentions. We see in our case, we would say 95% of the people selling food in the United States, they have good intentions. It's difficult if you have 95% to weed out the 5% that are not doing a good job. So we are basically just targeting that small population, the small segment. And if you put that in perspective, FDA regulates $800 billion of the US economy. Look at this number. That means on every dollar spent in the United States, 20 cents is regulated by the FDA. So our gamut, it's not just food, it's drugs, dietary supplements, radiological devices, the blood supply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list is humongous. And our teams may be in size when they hear the size of FDA. So it's a big agency. If you put that in perspective of what needs to be done, it's a small group. So this small group in the food safety, the food safety technical experts, we are 900. That includes HR and some administrative part and so forth. So it's a Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. So now taking that, you have to develop the science, and we don't use data from others. We generate our own data, our own monitoring, our own data mining, and all the own tools. When industry and others don't know the methodology, we go into laboratories and have scientists and develop these methods so that we can detect it. So what is the landscape? So as was said before, and I'm just repeating this, is we don't know who's behind the screen in certain instances. Yeah, maybe Facebook, Google, and so on, but they're not taking ownership responsibility. Some of them say, hey, I have nothing to do with that, right? So we have to understand that, okay, what can we do to find the person who has the ownership? Sometimes they are not in the United States. So legally, we cannot take action on that. So you have to think of all these things, and it's quite complex. So we'll have to look at the products. These are changing, and industry is coming out with new stuff, good stuff. But it's all new, and you go from the multi-commodity food. We've never seen this before. We're talking about cell-based product. We're talking about we're going to be eating bugs. So these new technologies, industry is coming to us. And before it's out, they consult with us already. So we have good partnerships. And we took the step back and said, let's educate and understand instead of coming in with a hammer. So our philosophy and structure has changed. Our alliances, working with the BVL, working with DG Sanko, and so forth. We have good relationships internationally, and in the domestic arena, it's even tighter. As you saw my colleague presenting in criminal cases and so forth. For us, it's very easy and seamless to work and get together, pick up the phone and say, we have something we're going to do. People are meeting immediately. So our reaction time is a little bit, I would say it's pretty good. So what issues are there? Of the foods, fresh, frozen, processed, dietary supplements is the main thing we're seeing on e-commerce, which is our big topic and issue. Most of the issues are related to dietary supplements. That is the big thing. Cosmetics, over-the-counter drugs, medical devices, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the landscape? So let's look at regulations, what is in place. Right? Is it local? Is it national? Who's regulating? Who's your partner? What does the food code say? Sanitary transportation. So we have rules in place already and regulations. Prior notice, which is mandatory in the US. Registration is mandatory. And then the business. Large corporations, medium, small, mom and pop shops, and they're trying to do a good job, but they have no knowledge. So sometimes it's on purpose, and other times it's very much the lack of knowledge that they're trying to do something. They have this grandmother's recipe from a family has been doing for hundreds of years, and they say, hey, that's a good opportunity. But they have no science background. They don't have the education. And as soon as it crosses the state line for us, it's interstate commerce, it is FDA's jurisdiction. And in the US, I want to go back a little bit, we have a very good relationship with our states. So the states, the independent states, the Bundesländer, would be compared to what we have. So our 51 states, we basically have very good relationship with them, and they execute for FDA. So we work very closely with them. And we have district offices that manage to be speedier, somewhere between 3 to 4 states of California, Texas, some of the huge states we have, and others 8 to 10. So we have that distance for us is not much. It's a huge country, but it's not so significant. So these are the regulations that we already have. So the Bioterrorism Act was something that very much gave the FDA a lot of authority. So advance notice, registration, and then the retail establishments, distribution centers have to register. And you can go into those regulations, and that's why I have the citations. And then the Food Modernization Act with preventive controls. Preventive controls is a step beyond HACCP. It's really much, you have a HACCP system basically in place, critical control points, and you're doing all that good stuff. But then also, what are you doing before HACCP? What are you doing after HACCP? How are you going back if you see deviations and correcting the system? That is really the question. Because if you manufacture screws, statistically, things are bound to fail. The question is, are you going to catch it, that the screws are going out before they go out of the factory and are not well manufactured? Or are you going to take those losses? And that for us in the health could be lives, people getting very sick, ill, having sequelae, and being damaged for life. So sanitation, transportation, etc. So we're saying, let's just stop. Let's think first, understand. A colleague said earlier, let's think outside the box. And for me, I was thinking, no, Keller, you don't even understand the e-commerce box right now. Why am I going to step out and think of solutions if I don't understand the dynamic of it? So let's collaborate, let's work together, let's understand it, let's exchange information. It's basically, we don't need the details on it, but let's collect the data, uniform that so that we talk the same language, and that is electronic language I'm talking about. So there needs to be a codification so that we can exchange that data. That is key. So managing risk. Understand the actors. Who are they? And the measures that we have in place or that we would need to have, right? And I'm not going to read all of that, but I pretty much want to focus again on preventive controls. Going down there. HACCP, preventive controls, if you're looking at what is it? How can we prevent something? And how do we go back and rectify that issue? So, from the legal aspect, adulterated, these are very clearly defined in the US Code. We pretty much have enforcement and compliance. The Act gives us the authority. We have strategies in place. We have plans. Again, going back, that's why I like this job, is you plan it. You know it's going to happen. What is your plan? And it's not just having one plan. You have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different scenarios, because when that pops up, you do not have time to think. The issue is there. So we have done exercises where we're put in a room and they say, okay, you just were bombarded. This is out, no potable water, this, that, and the other. So we do these strategic exercises to see, even under pressure, how I wouldn't be talking like this calmly in the room. I may be running around like a decapitated chicken. Let me get the hell out of here, no. But if I have a plan, I know where the exit is, right? I'm calmer, and my decision is going to be much better. And my chances to have a good outcome are much better, right? So we have a lot of collaboration with our different agencies. We have, in the domestic, and that's why I highlight them, area, seizure is our preferred mode of action and the quickest one. Because taking legal action to build a case takes time. Time is not what you have when you're seeing an issue. On the import side, our preferred mode of action, which is immediate, we can do that immediately. We can detain without physical evidence. And we can hold that product for up to 30 days, legally. The law is clear, it's all written, it's not something we're doing, we have the structure. And then we do the tests, we do the checks, we may prepare a case. At this time, we're already preparing the case and getting everything. Everything has to be documented. There's a very legal, tight process in the United States, otherwise you lose the case. FDA does not like to lose cases. When we're writing a letter, when we're coming up with a case, it's pretty rare that we lose that case. If you're getting that, you better just sign off and listen to what we're saying. So what are the lessons that we saw? Again, on both sides, opportunities and actions is collaboration, education, outreach, because we don't know what we're dealing with. The landscape and surveillance side, identifying who's involved, et cetera, et cetera. So that brings us down to measuring risk. We are running risk models. We don't have the capacity to have so many employees, to test and check everything. So basically, we are developing, like the internet and everything is being used. We are using the same tools. They are using it. You go to we say, you don't go to a gunfight with a knife. you take a gun with you. So basically, use the same tool. Our experience in violations that I was mentioning is basically dietary supplements. What we're seeing in the area is the big #1 issue. The other foods, we haven't seen that much. They are unproven, illegal, they're recalled. I mean, all that is detail. For us, fraud is very clearly defined. There's no black or white. That's in our regulation. And what is very important is there is a direct and there's an indirect. Fraud is fraud, and the indirect effect, we don't even know what that is. That is the issue, is people are being sold hopes to survive the cancer. They're not taking the right treatment. Or you may have compound effects of medicines that we haven't even studied. We don't know. They're taking all these cocktails and stuff, plus their chemotherapy. That may be an explosion right there, right? So what is this new era that we're living in? So right now, we are requesting additional funding, and for us, the funding requests and the proposals for the budget that we get has to go through Congress, and you have to present data already. To get a budget approved, we have to have scientific evidence that this is really an issue. We know it is. We have that data, as you saw my colleague earlier presenting, of anabolic steroids being withdrawn and so forth. It is in our country. So we have data on contaminated and businesses not being conducted the right way and not understanding the complexity. What we don't like is not understanding something. And Congress doesn't like that either. If you don't have an explanation, you're going to be drilled in Congress. And it's not a good experience. You feel really, really small. So what is smarter? For us, what is smarter food safety? We'll use digital technology, and that's what we're asking a lot of funds for. The tools of traceability, they have to be better. We're using blockchain. We're using data mining. And it doesn't have to be expensive. For example, we're launching a pilot study right now. The basic risk model that I'm using in that commodity is a SAS-based, statistical, publicly available risk model. We designed the factors, which we know, and we're data mining our database. We're getting excellent results. They're comparable to the technical evidence that we had before. But it's done much quicker. It cost my team probably $50,000 to put that together. That for public health, all the acidified, shelf-stable products, I can run that database in a matter of minutes on any factor that I want. So I can pull out the deviations very, very quickly. And then what we do, targeted inspection. We go and visit, knock, knock. By the way, let me look at your process. And international as well. We know who the good players are. We know who the bad players are, bottom line. Because we have mandatory registration. They have to file the process. I have the data, so I just look at it. So what's the next step? All these words, all of this has to be considered. So I had to look at how many. Each one of those is a topic by itself. I don't understand it. So let's step back. Let's look at it, analyze, and see what is the most effective, less costly, and the highest priority first, and then go down the list. Let's not just do everything at once. So, next step for us, let's figure out how we can do it safely. But we feel that we are already a little bit behind the 8 ball. We are playing pool, and we are behind it. So we have to be careful not to let technology and everything outpace us. We have to understand it. We have to be working together. And sometimes Germany may be ahead of us. Okay, let's collaborate. At the end, it's people's health. It's global. It doesn't matter. That's why we share information. That's why our techniques, essays, and so forth, you like it or not, you may not, but we're trying to find a common language and share that information. If you want it, there it is, right? That's what it is about. You do it better, cheaper, let's find out, let's share that. It's science, it's people. So engage with multiple stakeholders, and this is what we did these last days here. It was fantastic. The amount of knowledge, of technical knowledge we have in this room alone is probably over 500 years of technology that we have together. If we each have just 10 years of work, look at all the knowledge, look at all the wealth. We don't take the time and listen. So, digital advances, traceability, packaging, time, temperature, and that's basically where we have. And engage consumers. Consumer is a very, very important part of that. Well, with that, those are the next steps. That is the future, and I thank you very much.